Hi everyone, this is the first in a series of films that I'll make for you on Streetcar, and my aim is to annotate some of the key scenes with you in the hope that this will help you produce responses that are really referring to the text, and also unpick some of the things in the text that you might need to revise. So as we look at key scenes, my hope is obviously it will give you knowledge of that scene itself. Now, there's only been one past paper where a specific scene has been referred to in the question, which was this one, the opening. Explore how Williams presents the opening of the play. So we should be prepared for a question that asks you to think about how Williams presents the poker scene, or how Williams presents the ending of the play, as well as this one. Characterization, obviously, so as I go through, if there's anything specific about particular characters, you might want to add to your revision notes about a particular character. And we need to think about the how with characterization, not just what is Williams saying about this character. We need to remember that they're literary constructs, and we need to think about how does he show what this character is like, using language or staging, but also why does he show that character like that, and how that connects to context. So hopefully every extract that we look at will try and make those links to context as well. Symbolism and imagery, we'll pick those out in each scene, and we will also think about the staging and the structure of the play and where this scene fits into it, because those two things tend to go together. So you probably want, like me, a pen and a highlighter. Here's two I demonstrated earlier, so that you can highlight key things and annotate along with me, because that will help you to remember it. So the play opens with this fragment of a poem by a poet called Hart Crane, called The Broken Tower. And this is an epigram. If you think about what that word means, it means writing outside. So it's part of the meta-narrative of the play. So meta-narrative is something that the writer gives you that informs your understanding of the story, but isn't actually part of the story itself. But this poem was so important to Williams that he insisted that it was printed in the programme of the play, so the audience would always have read it as the play started. And you might want to think about, with Streetcar, one of the interesting things about it that you could bring into your response, is it a play that's meant to be read as well as watched on stage? And you might want to think about what the implications of that are for readers rather than audience members. Let's have a quick look at the epigram. And so it was, I entered the broken world. So here we're kind of dropped right into the action, aren't we, straight away. And so it was, as if we have already heard part of the story. Williams has chosen the end of the poem, or a part of the poem part way through, and dropped us right into the action. And we are dropped in with him, his I, a broken world. So straight away we're giving an impression of a setting which is dysfunctional. To trace the visionary company of love, its voice an instant in the wind. So love here is personified. So if you get a question about love, you might want to think about the first time we meet love. It's almost described as a character in its own right. And love is so important in the play. Although love is very painful to most characters, there are so many different types of love going on. You know, familial love, passionate love, friendship. So straight away we're introduced to love. And we've got a strange kind of archaism here. I know not whither hurled. I don't know where it was thrown from. So there's a suggestion here that I think straight away Hart Crane, and therefore Williams, because he's chosen to share Hart Crane's words, are telling us that love is something that is eternal. It's very modern, but it's also very archaic. His final message about love is that it's not for long to hold each desperate choice. Love is transient. It doesn't last long, and there's always a sense of desperation about it. Desperate choice is an interesting word, or rather an interesting phrase, isn't it? That might be interesting if you were to write a response about any of the characters who are unhappy in love. It suggests that they make choices that are desperate. We would say, wouldn't we, colloquially, that they're settling. You know, perhaps Stella is settling for Stanley, and Blanche has settled for many people, and Mitch almost settles for her. But essentially, they're choosing to be with people that don't quite suit them out of sheer desperation. So we'll move on now into actually scene one. And the first thing to notice, obviously, is the huge length and the didactic nature of the stage directions. Williams tells you exactly where the play is set, what it looks like, in minute detail. So he is a didactic playwright. That means that he wants things done a certain way. The colloquial way to explain that would be bossy, I suppose. And let's have a look at what he says about the opening of the play. So the exterior of a 2-story corner building on a street in New Orleans, which is named Elysian Fields. So these 2-story corner buildings are really iconic. So he wants you immediately to picture something that he knows that most readers or audience members will relate with New Orleans. The setting of New Orleans is not accidental. It couldn't be interchanged for New York or San Francisco. New Orleans is really important. And this section is called Elysian Fields. Now, the Elysian Fields were where Roman soldiers went to after they died. So if we put sort of classical soldier heaven. So if you get a question, again, about love, you could talk about how love is kind of combative. If you get a question, you know, about Stanley, where he's gone to live there with Stella, it should be his heaven. It should be his heavenly reward for having fought in the war. But is it? And the Elysian Fields run between the L and N tracks and the river. So it's where our play is set is in the middle of the railroad tracks and the river. So it's almost a kind of liminal space, isn't it? It's a place stuck between two modes of transport, or two things that move, railroads and rivers. Sorry, I've just written liminal rivers, I mean liminal spaces. So that's quite interesting, isn't it? It's almost like it's in its own little bubble and everything else is moving around it. And it tells you the section is poor, but unlike corresponding sections in other American cities, it has a raffish charm. Now again, don't overlook little things like this. If you get a question about setting, here's some evidence that Williams hasn't just set it in an other American city. There's something that he wants you to know about New Orleans, and what the audience or reader would know about New Orleans fits into that meta-narrative. And he tells us a little bit here about what he needs you to know about New Orleans. It's poor. So this is not a wealthy area. Now remember, this fits with the context of realism. After the Second World War, plays that featured real people and their real genuine concerns became really important, because it was felt that ordinary working class people had made a huge contribution to the world during World War II, and their stories deserve to be told. And throughout this play, Williams is at pains to show the reality of people's lives. You know, the little apartment, the fact that they're all crammed together, it's too hot, the street sellers, you know, the racism, the domestic violence. He doesn't try to paint a picture which is glamorous, and that's very different to the plays and films that would have gone immediately before this. So equally, he points out that this is not like other American cities. He wants you to understand that New Orleans exists in this little bubble, this liminal space, where it's rather like world turned upside down in Shakespeare, isn't it? Things that couldn't happen elsewhere happen. And it has a raffish charm. Now, raffish is a really interesting word, because it normally refers to a person. So he's personifying New Orleans. And raffish means usually a man who's charming but a little bit dangerous. And that's exactly what New Orleans is like. It's got a real charm, a real sense of you know, engagement if you stay there, but there is a sense that it's a little bit edgy. So that's a really useful word to describe the setting. The houses are mostly white frame, weather grade, rickety outside stairs and galleries. So rickety means they're likely to fall apart. So again, you get that sense of New Orleans being rather tatty and real. and quaintly ornamented gables. This building contains 2 flats upstairs and down.